I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about Longo accuses the UFC of favoritism towards Islam Makhachev after rough treatment of Aljamain Sterling. Why is he saying Islam Makhachev for? This is interesting. Let's find out. UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling seemingly has the deck stacked against him ahead of his next title defense. Aljamain Sterling defeated Henry Cejudo by split decision in a 5-round fight at UFC 288 New Jersey on May 6, 2023. Aljamain Sterling also came into the fight with a bicep injury, but won anyway. Instead of taking time off to heal his body, UFC immediately announced that Sean O'Malley would challenge Sterling for the bantamweight title. Sean O'Malley actually walked into the octagon after Sterling won, and they basically announced the fight right there. Although Aljamain Sterling did not want to fight at UFC 292 on August 19th, UFC President Dana White made a matchup with O'Malley for the title as the headline event anyway. Since the fight announcement, Aljamain Sterling has publicly spoken out against how he feels the UFC treats him by having him compete in a fight 3 months after his last fight. Despite the challenging task of defending his title, Aljamain Sterling is motivated to defeat Sean O'Malley as the rivalry escalates. Another potential issue that O'Malley is looking to exploit is Sterling having to cut weight to make the 135-pound weight limit, which may be difficult having fought in May. Okay. While Sterling is set to defend his title for a second time this year, other title holders like UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev have had time to rest and prepare for it. Hold on, I'm going to just stop right there. Why are they just pointing out Islam Makhachev is what I don't understand. Brandon Moreno has only fought once this year. Jamal Hill has only fought once this year. John Jones has only fought once this year. Israel Adesanya has only fought. Like, what's the Islam Makhachev thing? I don't understand, but let's start again. While Sterling is set to defend his title for a second time this year, other title holders like UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev have had time to rest and prepare for their next fight. Alexander Volkanovski's only fought once this year, and he lost. This is an issue that Aljamain Sterling coach Longo has spoken out against, as his fighter is, quote, being forced to fight Sean O'Malley at UFC 292. Longo sounds off on UFC playing favoritism. Longo appeared on the Anik and Kenny Florian podcast via video from his gym to discuss the ongoing situation between UFC and Aljamain Sterling. He supported Aljamain Sterling as he was in disbelief that his fighter Aljamain Sterling would defend his title against Sugar Sean O'Malley so quickly after the fight with Henry Cejudo. Let me see. They both also discuss other champions and the UFC seemingly not rushing to defend them their titles. To me, in business, even down here, you know what people like: consistency. Like, if I come here, everybody pays $200 a month, and then they're walking around the gym and someone says, no, he only charges me $75. That's not good, you know what I mean? It's got to be consistent. That's why I say we're giving examples where it seems like favoritism. I would say I get the metaphor there. I really do, but I would say I totally disagree with that. The rent has to be paid at a certain price. You can't force fighters to fight every 3 months or every 6 months. Their opponents could be injured. There could be no good opponents at that time. They could be injured. So, $200 a month is, that's a bill. That has to be paid. You can't say to fighters, hey, you need to fight 3 times a year or you're going to lose your fight championship. I don't think that's the way the UFC is going to work. So as far as, what this page is killing me. Wow. So as far as why some fighters, quote unquote, are paying $75, which if you want to go by that metaphor, it's because there's no opponent, or maybe they're injured, or this or that. There's a reason why some fighters, quote unquote, pay $75 compared to paying $200. Is what I and I would not have a problem with that if we're gonna go down with that metaphor. As far as why does someone pay $75 compared to someone paying $200? I disagree with the metaphor. Don't get it wrong. But if you're gonna go down that metaphor as far as in the UFC, as far as in this sport, then yeah, of course, there's gonna be, the Canelo Alvarez's in boxing who fight twice a year, maybe three times a year, and they make $300 million. And there's other fighters who fight in boxing every 2 months, and they barely, don't make as much money. So I don't agree with that analogy, is what I would say. Ray Longo continued. I think it's the inconsistency as well as Islam Makhachev. Why does he take out Islam Makhachev? I don't understand this. As well as Islam Makhachev hasn't fought in a year, which isn't true. Why are you forcing me to fight 2 months? Like, that's where I have a problem. I like fairness. I like the transparency of knowing everybody's doing the same thing. Like, if Dana wanted to turn everybody around every 2 months, then that's it. That's what you signed up for. This is their rules. It's their company. He built it up. He gets the quarter shots. But to do one thing one time and not the other time, I think that's where it gets a little sticky for me. Now, listen, I don't disagree with this statement. I see where he's coming from. It isn't fair, on an even level of, okay, why is Aljamain Sterling coming back to fight before, other fighters, other fighters who fought 4 months ago? Why isn't Islam Makhachev fighting earlier? Why isn't John Jones, who had a first round victory, a flawless victory, why is he allowed to take off 6 months when there are already challengers ready for him? There's Miocic, there's Sergey Pavlovich. I also look at the Alex Pereira Israel Adesanya fight. Why is Alex Pereira, who got knocked out by Israel Adesanya, why is Alex Pereira coming back fighting before the person he lost to? That doesn't make sense, right? Like, if you knock someone out, how can they come back and fight before you, right? So it's like, what are you going to do, right? I have no idea. I don't really have an answer to why some fighters, aren't scheduled for fights, and why the UFC is pushing Aljamain Sterling to defend his belt versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. My thing is this, and if Aljamain Sterling isn't ready or doesn't want to fight at UFC 292, I think it should be in his clear right. Like, I don't know if the UFC is threatened to take his belt away or anything like that. I know they've, quote unquote, threatened to make the Sean O'Malley fight an interim title. If I were Aljamain Sterling and I really didn't want to fight at UFC 292, or I have a bicep injury, or I want to take more than 3 months, 3 months to recover, then I would just say don't fight. It's like, shouldn't he just say, like, you know what? No, I'm not going to take the fight. How about that? Let the UFC do whatever they have to do. I have a bicep injury. I fought 2 months ago. It was a 5-round split decision, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm not prepared. I'm not ready to come back and fight. I don't know what Ray Longo is referring to when he says that the UFC is forcing Aljamain Sterling to fight. He says being forced to fight Aljamain Sterling is being forced to fight at UFC 292. That I have a problem with that. That would be a problem, right? Because it's just like, one, I don't know if the UFC's ever forced anybody to fight or anything like that. And like I said, I have not heard, I'm an MMA casual, but I have not heard the UFC threaten to strip Aljamain Sterling of his belt. I know they've said something about an interim title, but like I said, if I'm Aljamain Sterling, if I have an injury, if I'm not ready to come back 3 months later and fight Sean O'Malley, and the UFC is not threatening to strip me of the belt, then, I don't think it's really that big of a deal. Like I said, half of this article I totally agree with. The other half I don't agree with. I don't agree with the analogy of everybody needs to pay, $200 a month, when the rent is due. As far as the UFC, I don't think the UFC could force their champions to fight every 3 months or every 4 months or anything like that. I would not agree with it because, like I said, there's situations for every champion that's very different as far as opponents and for injuries. And, when it comes to injuries, like I said, if Aljamain Sterling is injured, if he has a bicep injury, if he can't make weight in 3 months from now, then he just should not take the fight. Brandon Moreno has only fought once this year. Alexander Volkanovski has only fought once this year. He hasn't even fought in the featherweight division. Alexander Volkanovski fought in the lightweight division. Islam Makhachev only fought once this year. Israel Adesanya only fought once this year. Jamal Hill only fought once this year. That's in January. John Jones only fought once this year. So Aljamain Sterling would be the first champion to have fought twice this year in a span of 3 months. And they've not, and I've not heard this to any champion, as far as them being forced to take a fight or being stripped of their championship. The UFC is not threatening to strip Jamal Hill. They're not threatening to strip Brandon Moreno. They're not threatening to strip John Jones or anybody like that. So, as far as Aljamain Sterling, I don't know what's going on as far as them forcing him to fight Sean O'Malley. I'm not calling cap on the story, right? Because like I said, I'm an MMA casual. But if I was Aljamain Sterling, if the UFC is not threatening to strip you of your title, then, if you don't want to fight, for whatever reason, you don't want to fight at UFC 292, and you have valid reasons to say, you are not ready to fight at, 3 months later, it should be fine. I don't see, what's the problem here? I know the UFC and Aljamain Sterling are going back as far as, do they respect him and things like that. This article kind of gives an example of Aljamain Sterling understandably feeling, disrespected. But like I said, if I was Aljamain Sterling, if I'm injured, you just don't take the fight. We don't have to go down, a role of, the UFC trying to play Aljamain Sterling, or the UFC are, trying to, make fights where Aljamain Sterling is going to lose or anything like that. If he really feels like he's being forced into this fight, then don't take the fight. Do not take the fight, and just let Sean O'Malley fight for an interim title, right? Like that, to me, that's even better. Like you could show, like, dude, you're not even fighting for my belt. Like, I'm the champion, you're fighting for another belt. Go and fight for that belt. I could care less. I'll see you when I'm ready to see you at the end of this year. 6 months later, I got to deal with this bicep injury, but that's what Aljamain Sterling should do. And if I was Ray Longo, that's what I would be telling him to do, right? But let me know your opinion of this story. Do you agree with Ray Longo that the UFC is showing favoritism towards Islam Makhachev? And that's another thing. I don't understand what's going on with that part of this article. Why from all of the champions, and like I said, I'm an MMA casual, but why from all of the champions, Jamal Hill fought in January, right? Brandon Moreno fought in January, right? Islam Makhachev, Alexander Volkanovski, they fought in February. John Jones fought in, March, April, right? So I don't understand why Ray Longo just specifically calls out Islam Makhachev for fighting. Maybe he forgot that Islam Makhachev fought Alexander Volkanovski or something like that. But, he's not the only champion that's only fought once this year, right? So I don't understand what's the beef with Islam Makhachev. I don't think the UFC is showing specific favoritism towards Islam Makhachev at the moment. So I totally disagree on that point. But let me know your opinion of this story. I'm Jason, UFC. Today we had a story about Ray Longo accuses the UFC of showing favoritism towards Islam Makhachev, of all people. hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.